one of the first, I'm going to try not to cry, one of the first graffitis that was scrawled on the wall across our building in Iran was,
So you were still living there when that happened?
oh yeah,
So you had to do that?
yeah. Yeah, my passport picture is,
Whoa.
and it's really interesting because I've looked at it and people have said to me, especially, 10, 15, 20 years ago, when I was younger, people would look at it and say, you look younger now, even when I was 30, than you did in your passport picture, which is from the time that you were 16.
Wow.
That's how depressing and just so devastating it was to go through that.
Now, how did you guys get out, and like what went into that process?
So after the revolution, the Iranian regime didn't exactly have an official position on the future of the Jewish community. They didn't know what exactly they were going to do, if they were going to expel the Jews or keep them. They didn't know vis-a-vis the Jewish community whether they were going to be hostile or accepting. And I think both tendencies coexisted within the regime at the same time. So, in some places they were saying, these Jews are indigenous Jews, and gosh, if there is any community indigenous to Iran, it's the Jews. There were Jews in Iran before there were Muslims in Iran.
Really?
Jews went to Iran after the fall of the Second Temple.
In like the 70s AD?
Yeah. Into Iran after they were driven out when Persian Empire was a ubiquitous empire in the region, and they took refuge in Iran at the time.
And so the Persians were there when they went there?
Yes. And
who are Iranians now, right?
Who are Iranians now, but
Yeah.
at the time it was called the Persian Empire.
Right.
And, Cyrus the Great famously said, gave them refuge and sheltered them in Persia. And part of, one destination for Jews who had been driven out of Israel, Jerusalem, major destination was Persia, and Islam had not yet come into being.
Whoa.
When Jews were in Iran.
We just pulled this up. I want to read this. This is going to ignite the comment section. Jews have lived in what is now Iran for over 2,700 years, predating the arrival of Islam by about 1,000 years. I'm just reading this, people. Their presence in the region began with the Babylonian exile in 586 BC, when many Jews were exiled to Babylonia, modern-day Iran, after the destruction of the first temple. So this is
right. I'm sorry. So first temple,
not
I said
the
second
first
temple.
one, right? When some returned to Judea, while some returned to Judea, many remained and established a Jewish community in Persia. Wow.
Right.
You weren't kidding.
I wasn't. So it's really, really. I mean, think about irony.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the first. I'm going to try not to cry. One of the first graffitis that was scrawled on the wall across our building in Iran was "Jews get lost," with a swastika. I talk about that in my memoir. So I wake up one morning. It's December of 1978. The revolution hasn't happened yet, but there's, the country is in a state of turmoil. And I see this sign, and I don't know what it is. I've never seen it. I'd never seen a swastika in my life. So I read Jews Get Lost. I go back inside. I drag my father to the door and I open the door. He reads it and his face is ashen. He loses all of the color. I look at him and I know it's bad, right? And he shuts the door and he says, let's just go inside. He doesn't say what it is. He doesn't open the door and says, oh, my child, allow me to express this piece of, explain this history to you. He shuts the door. He is terrified. He takes me back inside and I say, what is that sign? Because I had never seen a swastika. And so it is in that country where the presence of Jews precedes the presence of Muslims by about 1,000 years, where we, as the Jews, are called upon to get lost, are told to leave. And so you have to understand how devastating this has to be, where you're told to get out of this place. Then so many of my father's relatives, and about this I write also at length in my memoir and elsewhere, my father's sisters and their businesses, which was fabric. They had a fabric store, was set on fire in a village in the central Iran, and everything burns, including the cash that they used to save in the folds of the fabric in the store, because they, this was a village. They didn't take money to the bank. They kept it, safe at home or in their, under the fabric. Everything burned. They were completely made penniless. And so I see this aunt with her 7 children come to our home in January of 1979, knocking on our door, tears running down her face, saying to my father, brother, everything is burned, everything has turned into ashes. And next week after that, she's on a plane with her 7 children to Israel. And now the rest of the world is saying, go back to wherever you came from. Well, wherever they came from, at least in the case of my paternal side of the family, was the very place where you set things on fire. I mean, I didn't want to go back to all this again after the conversation that we had, but you pulled this all up, and
this is great.
Yeah,
because I can see the emotion on your face talking about it all these years later, and how that must feel. So I want to be careful how I put this, because I damn well do not want to turn that around on you in any way. But earlier you did say, obviously, you never wanted to leave, and your hand was forced, but you've now accepted that, you're here, and you don't have, I forget how you put it, but you're like, I don't have the right to Iran.
I don't have any claims over it anymore.
That's so interesting, though, that you would have that type of visceral memory, understand the history of your people being there, understand how wrong that is for anyone to be told they can't be somewhere where their father's father were and their father's father was. But now you can have the perspective of, don't support that happened, but it did, and so here we are, and I accept it.
Yeah. My parents didn't reconcile in the same way as I did.
You were telling me.
But I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a thinker, and I put this in sort of civilizational perspective. And I realized that, my God, it took me a decade or two to understand this, but what a great place I came to. My last book is called A Beginner's Guide to America for the Immigrant and the Curious. And it was my homage to America. When I published it in 2021, 2022, I can't remember exactly which, but I, as people were turning xenophobic in our country, and we're saying, our country's full and we can't afford any more immigrants, I thought I should speak up on behalf of immigrants and say, if there's anybody who understands the value of this democracy and is willing to die to defend it, it's me. And let me tell you why. And this book was what I did to say that so many of you who were born and raised in this country are missing the point, because you don't understand that so many things that we have here, they're not a part of the decor.
Right.
They're not. They haven't always been there. They're not. They're not something that just grow here.
Right.
That if you relent and forsake them for even a second, they will be lost. And I can tell you that because I lived in a place where they were lost, and I don't see it as being permanently here and perennial part of this landscape. That if you don't defend it and guard it, they can be gone.
You also, though, like, you got to come here, and I'm biased. I just won the lottery being able to be born in America, right? It's crazy thinking about that sometimes. I could have been born somewhere like current Iran or something like that and have a whole different life that I wouldn't like nearly as much. But, this place, for all the problems we have, is such an amazing place, and I'm so lucky to live here, and it seems like you feel the same way. You were able to get here. There's a lot of people, even from Iran, from that situation, that either never got out or didn't get to land in a country as nice as America, and that's the unfortunate thing, because whenever you're talking about people who are going to be displaced, where they end up also is every bit as much of the question. I think that's a lot of what people are concerned about right now in Palestine, because I would love to get your thoughts on this. You have a situation where it's kind of a lose-lose. And what I mean by that is, if you have a bunch of people who are in a war zone where everyone's dying, and they're going to keep dying when they're there. But if you push them out to other countries in the area, not America, right? So they won't get to come here. They're going to go to somewhere that, frankly, is not as good. You're going to ethnically cleanse the area. Even if that's not the intention, that is what happens. Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.